Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast for 9th March 2023. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, usually in Montreal, but Mark, this week you find me in London. And just a few days ago, I was up in Glasgow making preparations with some of my colleagues from the CX Outsourcers team for our upcoming conference, May 31st, which we know that you're going to be a participant at.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really looking forward to being at the event. I've got my flights booked just a few days ago, and so I'm planning everything. And I've already booked a sleeper train to go from Glasgow back down to London once the conference is finished.
Well, that's wonderful. You know, I can tell you, Mark, it's been really fun being in Glasgow earlier this week, and the events in London have been magnificent too. The Cross Connect Forum that was hosted by Kirk Laughlin and the Nearshore Americas gang to connect outsourcers from the Caribbean and Latin America with businesses in the UK was a huge success. And today, with my business partner, Michael Zdanowski, we are hosting a lunch with BPO executives for Enterprise Georgia, certainly an up-and-coming location that every outsourcing executive needs to have on their radar. But today we're here to talk about something a little bit different. We're here to talk about cost optimization in the technology realm of CX with our special guest, Stuart Knight from FlowSwitch.
Well, you did this interview, so why don't you talk a little bit about Stuart's focus? Because I think you also worked together in the past, didn't you?
Yeah, for full disclosure, Stuart and I are former co-workers as well as friends. So for the longest time, Stuart has been involved in not just assessing what technologies need to be implemented in regards to a contact center and CX environment. He's also been at the heart of discussions when it comes to what are the right choices that need to be made in order to ensure that not just the best technologies are in place, but you're not dealing with redundant technologies. You're not dealing with overlap between technologies. You've got the most advanced technologies that you need if you're running a CX operation. And something that really hit home for me was when we were discussing the extent to which technology optimization and the cost element around it is something that so many contact center operators just don't undertake. And this ends up impacting efficiency, and it ends up impacting the ability to deliver good outcomes when it comes to either a voice or a digital interaction.
Yeah, and this is a perennial problem in most contact centers. I mean, I've seen agents that have to use half a dozen different systems, just to switch between different customer databases, product databases, and they're cutting and pasting information from one place to the next. So clearly, there's a great deal of optimization that you can do within the center before you even look at the customer journey.
Well, this is it. And we talked a little bit about this in the chat with Stuart. One of the things that really hit home for me, Mark, is the fact that you've got agents that are having to deal with so many different systems on the front line. Now, just imagine what the management of all those different systems looks like on the back end. And if there's a way of trying to identify where some of these redundancies exist, you can not just streamline the actual expense, capital and operational, but you can also streamline the efficiency that you're going to get by undertaking effectively an audit and making some perhaps uncomfortable decisions, but ones that are probably in many cases overdue to be made.
Okay, so why don't we go straight to the interview with Stuart Knight on cost optimization.
Well, one of the most oft discussed elements within the CX space, but one that is not necessarily perhaps the sexiest out there, is technology. But it's one that we're going to be diving into in a big way today with our guest, Stuart Knight from FlowSwitch. Now, Stuart, it's great to have you on the podcast. And just for full disclosure for our listening audience, you and I are not just friends, but we're also former co-workers.
That's absolutely right, Peter. And it's a pleasure to be on the podcast, and great to connect again and have some time to chat through today's topics.
Yeah, absolutely. The pleasure is all ours. And I think as a point of reference, as I mentioned, technology is always a point of discussion when it comes to good contact center management. But it's one that I think that if you don't have a tech background, you might shy away from. And we don't want to do that today. We want to put everything on the table because there's so many different elements that we're going to be bringing up and we're going to be discussing over the course of the next 15, 20 minutes, I think are very important. But as a point of reference, maybe you just want to talk a little bit about Flow Switch and talk a little bit about what you guys do in the market.
Certainly, no problem at all. So firstly, brief intro to myself. Stuart Knight. I'm the Chief Information Officer here at Flow Switch. Got 25 years experience within the technology sector, and that's largely around designing and building and managing enterprise carrier grade infrastructures that have underpinned some of the market sector leaders across the US and Europe. In terms of Flow Switch and who we are, so Flow Switch is a team of specialists with over 25 years of experience of operating robust, reliable, and cost-efficient platforms for several private equity-backed ventures across the globe. We offer a varying suite of technology services, ranging from things like cost optimization, infrastructure assessments, security, and fractional C-level augmentation that we can help our clients with on a daily basis.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much for that overview. And you mentioned cost optimization, and that's really going to be what we're going to be getting into today. That's going to be the core of our discussion. And when it comes down to cost optimization, I think it's something that we are all aware is a process that's very much essential in the context of CX delivery, especially when it comes to technology. But it's also, when people hear cost optimization, I think it's one of those things that they will either blank out at because they don't understand it or they'll shy away from. So as a primer, can you give us a sense about what exactly is technology cost optimization from the perspective of how Flow Switch would be looking at it?
Yeah, so in its simplest forms, technology cost optimization aims to reduce the total cost of ownership of technology assets and operations, but importantly, ensuring that they continue to support the organization's objectives. Ensuring technology assets are suitably leveraged and aligned with business, aligned with the business itself, not only allows for a streamlined environment and a streamlined infrastructure, but more importantly, allows cash to become free and allow that to be reinvested back into the business or back into the technology arena to make very much needed improvements with the environment. So it's about taking a holistic view of the technology sphere and then breaking it down to some of the core principles that we'll touch on later, and driving cost out of the business, but maintaining that level of agility to position the business well for its digital transformational aspirations.
And that word agility is something that immediately sort of resonated with me, and I'll tell you why. Because I know that there's always been a view over the course of the past 25, 30 years that technology is there to enable a business to do better. Technology is there to make sure that processes are done in an efficient manner. But Stuart, I don't know about you. I'm finding more and more that technology for a lot of organizations is not just confusing, but it's becoming cumbersome because there's no married up approach. There's no strategic, holistic approach, as you alluded to. And that's actually impeding a business to operate efficiently and to make sure that processes are as streamlined as possible. So is that where something like a cost optimization program can come in?
I think it is. It absolutely is, Peter, and I think it goes a lot deeper than that, because I think when people think about cost optimization and cost in general, they think about a financial burden and a financial saving to a business overall. But there are several other sort of C-level challenges that present themselves if an environment is not suitably structured, suitably optimized in terms of its structure and its cost base. And I'll just touch on a few of these for you if that's okay. So first and foremost, if the environment is not suitably defined and aligned to the shape of the business and has bloated technology costs, you can lose business. There's a loss of business agility, and no doubt you will start to fall behind your competitors in that digital transitional pace. Closely linked to that is, because infrastructure is potentially are not optimized and are not structured in the appropriate manner, which has then potentially led to lack of investment into technology. There's a big concern. I know this is a hot topic at the moment, but the security gaps can exist around the sort of perimeter of an infrastructure, and leave then a company open to potential breaches, which we all know the devastating effect that can have in terms of the business itself and the reputational damage that goes along with that. But then moving a little further down the chain, again, if an investment, if an infrastructure is not suitably managed and maintained according to the as I say, the business shape, you may introduce things like failure to comply with regulatory framework, which again will increase chances of penalties and financial burdens. One that sort of leaps out to me quite a bit is the unexpected budget hits. Now, whilst an infrastructure is working and is operating efficiently according to either the IT team or the business owners, because there's no issues or outages, there's always going to come a time whereby a platform, a service, a suite of servers, they're going to require a significant capital uplift to actually swap them out. So that proactive, holistic approach to the actual infrastructure and the cost base is key. So you don't have those budget surprises, and you've got to shell out tens of thousands of dollars to replace aging and legacy technology platforms. But I think one of the big things really is that, and I mentioned it earlier on, is that loss of a business agility. And it does actually prevent digital transformation to occur in a seamless fashion and at the pace of the business. It becomes a situation whereby you're in the position where you might have to rush that digital transformation because you haven't sort of paced yourself and planned your infrastructure over sort of months or years. And then you're actually forced into a rabbit hole, and you'll make decisions then that are just not aligned to the business, not appropriate to the business, and eventually will damage your digital transformational needs as a whole. Technology is evolving, Peter. You know that as well as I do. Legacy technology is expensive, and if it's not optimized, a business will fall behind, and the business will lose pace with its competitors, which I touched upon a little earlier on. But there's two stats that I'll throw out there. 85% of enterprise decision makers say they have a time frame of approximately 2 years to make significant inroads into digital transformation, or they will suffer financially and fall behind their competitors. 2 years is not a long time. And it goes back to my point that I mentioned earlier on about the barrier to digital transformation. If you don't approach this in a paced, sensible manner, then you're going to actually start making rash decisions, and they'll be regretted as you move forward within your digital delivery. And then the second point is that 25% of companies have a clear understanding of new and underperforming digital touchpoints. That's great. But what about the 75% that do not? And at Flow Switch, we help companies and clients embrace each of those areas, break them down into meaningful bite-sized chunks of pockets of delivery, and help them through that journey through some of the pillars that we'll talk about shortly.
Okay, so Stuart, thinking about this logically, an organization, I'm working for one of those 75% companies that you were saying that's effectively blind in terms of what they need to do. Who, generally speaking, within one of those organizations would pull the trigger on wanting to work with a company like Flow Switch to undergo a cost optimization exercise?
I think that it would be positioned at a very senior IT director, IT manager, SVP of technology services, or indeed at the sort of the sort of CEO or COO level. Some of the items that I discussed earlier on they are challenges for the C-suite. There's no doubt about that. So having that aligned, joined up thinking between SVP of technology, IT director, and that C-suite to bring these challenges to the table, I think is key. So the sort of interface point, Peter, could be any of the above, but technology cost optimization does mean, as you opened up the call, does mean different things to different people, but there are very, very key fundamental C-level challenges that are out there. So the target audience for this really is quite wide reaching.
That's really interesting. And I mean, I think that as we're looking at some of these different elements and some of these legacy systems, as you examine what so many different organizations have in place, especially from a CX tech perspective, what surprises you the most when you undertake some of these exercises, Stuart, when you go into organizations that you might think are fairly far along in the digital transformation process, but you find that once you start peeling the layers back, they might not necessarily be as far ahead as they might think?
I think what always sort of surprises us is that there is a mindset within the technology sphere that if it isn't broken, leave it alone and don't actually touch it. So there certainly is a fear to lift the hood or peel back the layers of the onion that you mentioned, Peter. But it always surprises me by the amount of low-hanging fruit that can exist within an infrastructure in terms of its cost base. And by an example that I'll give there are things like when a system may be put in place, it may be deemed that the entity requires 1,000 licenses to serve X product. Well, in reality, day-to-day operations, that the consumption is sort of maybe circa 500, 600 licenses. So there's a 40% saving right there on the table, but because nobody has actually either vested the time and energy to investigate a licensing element in for a particular software environment, if you like, or a contact center platform, then they're leaving dollars on the table. And again, it's that fear of actually working and changing things that are not broken. That's one area which is the sort of low hanging fruit. But the other thing, Peter, which I find quite often the case is once a vendor has got its feet under the table, if you like, within an organization, complacency kicks in and that vendor relationship is very rarely challenged. And what I mean by that is that a renewal will be put on the table year after year after year. There'll be increases due to various elements, but you'd be surprised about the number of entities out there that do not challenge their vendors, do not hold them accountable, and drive strong negotiation discussions when it's time for renewal. And not only that, taking a look at their vendors holistically and saying, I have vendor A that provides feature X, I have vendor B that provides feature Y. And do you know what? Feature X and feature Y are very similar, and both vendor A and vendor V both provide that service. So let's consolidate those together and drive economies of scale. So they're just examples of areas that we sort of see on a regular basis.
Okay, cool. So final question, Stuart. I'm going to maybe ask you if you could give an idea if somebody wanted to look at a cost optimization exercise and talk with FlowSwitch, what would a typical engagement cycle look like in that sense?
So we would go into a company and we would first of all we'd conduct a cost audit with the individual in question. Now that may be a senior IT figure. It may be somebody at the C level that has the ownership of the technology area. But a full review and cost audit. And what we're looking for there really, Peter, is to identify any underutilized technology assets that are not providing value. The second thing we'd look at is obviously look at the contract space. I've talked about that just a moment ago, understanding if there's opportunities to streamline, if there's any areas of overlap that we can expose and actually bring those discussions to the forefront. There's the licensing element that we talked about, making sure that there's optimization of the assets that are being utilized correctly in terms of licensing space, and then understanding the technology as a whole to really understand how they've embraced the movement and migration to cloud. And then obviously one of the pieces that would be very, very interesting for us to look at with the companies to understand, are there any processes that can be automated? Can we introduce robotic software into a company to sort of eliminate and drive out that sort of repetitive task? Once we've sort of done that, and we've worked with the client, we can then produce a suite of reports which will make recommendations, and at that point we can hand that over to the actual client to deliver themselves, or FlowSwitch can help them through that in whichever pace they want, and then use us to actually coach and mentor them, or even execute some of the plans for them. Because what we'd like to do, we like to own the customer's problems. We don't like to just place a 50-page document on the table and walk away. We want to build a relationship and drive real value from the engagement that we've had.
Okay, well, thank you, Stuart Knight from FlowSwitch. It has been absolutely great catching up, hearing a little bit more about the cost optimization process, and I think really giving the listeners some food for thought. So I'm guessing that this will be the first of many engagements that we'll have with you in the CX Files. But in the meantime, have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week. Everything just went silent while you were talking.
That's bizarre.